Hello, everyone. Welcome to Caster Calls with ZombieGrub. I am here with Gillyweed, who I actually wanted to get to earlier because she's a very good friend and I've been talking to her for a while. And I think she's really awesome as far as the esports section goes. So I wanted you on for a while, but I know some things were happening and chaos is pretty much everywhere. But I'm really happy that you're finally here, Gillyweed. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here too and getting to hang out with an old friend. And I'm great. I'm just thrilled and thank you for having me.
Yeah, I mean, you were one of the people might not know this because it's now been so long, right? Like people mostly know you for your Heroes of the Storm work, but I mean, I knew you as the person doing StarCraft stuff.
Yeah, suspenders and all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been a long road since then.
Yeah. So that's I mean, but that is how you got into esports, is it not? Or do you have another story to tell about getting into esports?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the very beginning is I was working a job that I wasn't thrilled with. I actually used to help uh, write content for websites. And I had the opportunity to try going full time streaming and in esports. So I kind of just like spaghetti tactic, like threw at the wall to see what would stick. But I knew that like StarCraft was a game I was super passionate about. So I started like making YouTube content and kind of through that met you and was able to do like my first ever interviews with players on base trade. And then I also was doing like some event work on the side, which is how I eventually got to know CSA, the talent agency. And then um, through StarCraft events, met Anna Prosser Robinson. So I was able to, we started a podcast when Heroes was in its alpha stages, and that's kind of like where things eventually went to like community casting and then full on casting.
It's not a unfamiliar story to hear people talk about how they've gotten into esports because of StarCraft. It was, truly the I guess rebirth, maybe you would call it, because of course Brood War happened in Korea. But as far as the non-Korean market, StarCraft 2 really brought in the audience as we know it, and many people who now have super cool, awesome jobs will all say like, "Yeah, I started off by watching StarCraft." So it's not unfamiliar, but you didn't really start by casting StarCraft. I mean, you were doing content production and interviews. I mean, back then, did you think about being a commentator or an interviewer or a host or anything like that? Or was this more just to do a general variety content thing?
I definitely had always wanted to try commentating. StarCraft to me was so unapproachable because it's just like the hardest esport in my mind, right? Like I always really looked up to you, for example, for being able to do like hard analysis color commentary of it because like I would go to play it and I was like just trash at it. But a lot of my like early influences and people I looked up to, like Jeff was a huge role model for me because how amazing he was at making people like me laugh, and I was like, man, I want to entertain people like Jeff did. um, I loved Tastosis and that like camaraderie that they always have in their casts, and that was a big influence to me. And then like being able to cast some of the early hero stuff like with them at events, like Heroes of the Dorm was also like just a huge inspiration to me to be able to continue my casting career.
Okay, so there were some aspirations there, and then as you said, you met Anna, and you started up that show
Podcast,
that I
yeah.
yeah I remember I was on at least once. I
Oh
joined for
yeah.
a Here's the Storm game, which made my total Here's the Storm games played to about 15 or 20. So, but no, it was fun, and obviously, like I really liked both of you. I mean, who doesn't look up to Anna, right? With all that she did, including
Yes.
back into StarCraft. And then it was so cool that, like, I don't know, like this really cool friend that I'd made to StarCraft, suddenly is like hanging out with this like quote unquote big dog that is Anna, and you guys just are like trying to jump on this train. You weren't alone though in trying to jump on that train, and if I remember correctly, you guys were I mean, like time is such a concept, right? You guys were kind of coming in later. You kind of had to build your brand a little bit.
Mhm.
Anna was, of course, a host, but maybe not as like a caster. Sorry, and so you guys came in a bit later. It felt like there was already a decent amount of people not only clamoring for heroes jobs, but also actually getting those jobs when they were still
Mhm.
experimenting with what they wanted to do. Because heroes really was one of the first big esports from a big esports publisher to come out. So a lot of people thought that was going to be their next big gig. And I really wondered if it was going to work for you. And it felt like I kind of like lost track for 6 months. And when I came back, suddenly Gillyweed's this like huge fucking deal. So what happened there? I mean, was it really a slow buildup? Because it seemed like it was actually kind of fast, or maybe my perception's bad.
No, I look back on it and it feels really fast too, but it was kind of a grind. We had started the podcast, and then through the podcast met um, Eunice, Miss Honey, who had started this community site called Heroes Hype that was all about just making community heroes tournaments. And what was so awesome is that, like we really bonded with her, and then Anna and I kind of together were able to start commentating those heroes hype tournaments. And we did, like, it was a slog every week, turn up for hours to just like practice and refine and try to get better at casting. I think my, you know quote unquote big break was eventually there was an opening in one of the very early studio shows to determine like which teams would go to the Americas Championship, and after that BlizzCon, and I was asked to come on and commentate that, and um, it was a very nerve-wracking experience. It was terrifying. I definitely had like look back on one of those casts is like one of the worst ones I've ever had. And then like I kind of got a really great pep talk from like Kim Fan, that prompted me to really switch how I was approaching commentary at that point. But I think it was kind of a grind at the time that feels fast after the fact, but really was putting in the time.
Right. Yes. I mean, that is always the case, isn't it? But
Yeah,
someone like me, for instance, I can look back and be like, I did a lot of stuff before I got my first,
you did.
like big job.
Yeah.
So when I talk to some other people, like I talked to Lemon Kiwi from Overwatch, and she was like, "Yeah, just like 6 months ago, I was like brand new," and I was like, "Oh my god, it happened so fast."
Yeah.
But yeah, you said you talked to Kim Fan, by the way, is an awesome person. She's been very supportive of a lot of I guess up and comers. And
Yeah.
do you remember? Can you go into any details to what she said, or what did she say that made you change your perspective? What was that change?
Okay, so a lot of like how my approach had been was like, I don't really know. It was kind of just like, I'm just going to keep talking about the game. I'm going to learn the names of the abilities of all the heroes. Like, I'm really going to like just try to make sure that I'm nailing like just talking during a game. And like pacing and my voice a little bit, but like not really to the extent that I really started to get into later. But basically what happened is there was like a pretty like dramatic thing that happened with another commentator, and it was like devastating to me. It was really hard to come back the next day, but I made it through. And she sat down with me and she was like, look, I think you have a lot of potential. She used to be a commentator herself, and she was like, I want to bring you to more stuff, but you've got to get better. And I was like, deal. Okay, I'm gonna do it. So at that point, I actually hired a coach for like learning the game, and then like really started deep diving. That's when I started deep diving talents, which was at the time I was casting. I was known for knowing like a ton of the talents for the heroes, and that was the catalyst for all of that approach.
I am unfamiliar with MOBA commentary. You were known for knowing the talents. That was not a prerequisite.
So, well, every MOBA is different, right? Like you look at League and it's all about just the items. Um, the I would say in general, at the time that I started really looking at knowing all of the talents, it wasn't a set thing that people really did. They were a little bit, but I think that was. I do like to think that I sort of prompted that for everyone else to start really paying attention to the importance of those and how those interacted both together within the character, but then also like how the heroes with those talents could interact. It got really hard to do when more heroes started being released, by the way. It was so
Yeah, of
hard.
course. Yeah, I can't. I mean, I think of a lot of MOBAs, and I just the sheer amount of stuff that is there. I mean, there's the abilities plus the talents plus the weapons, the items rather, I should say, and
Hmm.
there's a couple other things I'm sure I'm missing. That yeah, I don't know. People say that StarCraft 2 is the hardest esport to play, and there's still a lot of respect there for people who commentate StarCraft 2, but I feel like as far as the sheer amount of like details, I don't know. That's not. it's not just something that I don't think StarCraft has like as much of details. I feel like no one started the commentary that way. Most of our commentary comes from the grandfathers of StarCraft themselves,
Yeah.
Tastosis, which is
Uh-huh.
very much so two friends talking to each other and expanding on general ideas for an audience that did not understand it.
Mhm.
So I remember thinking, when I was hanging out with you at BlizzCons and whatnot, like I was so impressed by how much you impressed people with your technical knowledge. And I looked at you, pouring over these notes and having these like spreadsheets, and I was like, fuck, man, even if I did try that with StarCraft, like I don't even know what spreadsheets I would make. I don't know if there's an equivalent, but it helps a lot. It gives you a lot of credit when you do have these these notes and you know all these technical terms. So that's awesome. I mean, to jump into a pretty, I guess, heavy topic pretty quickly. Did you ever feel like you had to because you're a woman? That old saying that, like, if you want to do this, want to be seen as doing the same job as the guy, you have to work twice as hard or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Was there any pressure there? Okay.
Oh, yeah. I think it only increased as time went on, whereas you'd think, like, as you establish yourself, it gets easier. But I think it's, like, the more you do, the more you realize that, like, or, like, people will talk to you and say that they look up to you, or, like, "You inspired me to start commentating," and, like, knowing that makes you feel like you have to keep going in a way that is, like, not just yourself commentating, but you're representative of, like, so much more. And you talk to many women in esports and nobody wants that, like, especially you look at, like, players, for example. And like, I think Gary from Overwatch, and it's like, I don't want to represent all of, like, women players everywhere. I just want to be able to play my game, and that's a lot of the times the battle that I would face. I would love to know, by the way, if you felt the same, but, like, I feel like I was constantly in that war between, like, I just want to be me instead of, like, I have to represent literally all of women in esports.
Yeah, so it is a really tricky thing. In general, we hear about, basketball stars saying, I'm not your role model.
Mm,
And I think that is something that people just kind of have to figure out their own path, like no matter their situation in life. When they get a certain amount of celebrity, do they want to kind of accept that job or not? For those who don't know, by the way, the person she's referring to was a woman Overwatch player. She still plays? Who, yeah, because she was a woman, she was kind of seen as like, I mean, a feminist icon, really. There
yeah,
was
beacon
the
of hope.
yeah, exactly. There was a Diva, I think is one of the Korean feminist groups, which is it's kind of cool, yeah, because it's Overwatch, and they
Yeah.
really took her and were like, hey, that's your thing now, and she's like this young lady who just like wants to play video games. So yeah, it was a perfect example. But I do feel it as far as whenever someone, the time I feel it the most, like because I don't know, I feel like my gender really does not come up that often because it's been such a long history with me in StarCraft. 90% of the people are used to me and never bring it up, and the 10% who do usually do it in a way that gets them banned instantly. So I just like block it out of my mind. But when I do really feel that whole like I am not the representative is when people ask me questions like, what do you think people can do to make
Yes.
you win feel more comfortable? And I'm just like sitting there and I'm like, well, I have my opinions, but like I'm not the person that has the facts. Like these are not things that are going to usher in a new age. And I don't have all the information. So if I say something and you counter with aha, got you, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, like okay, I guess. That is very frustrating. And I know that, you've kind of had even before Heart of the Swarm, I remember that you got invited to this really shitty show where like you were basically come on to talk as the woman perspective
Oh,
on an
yeah.
issue. And I just remember watching that. I was like, oh, I was like, I should like warned you or something because I knew they were going to do that. And I just, because I said no, a couple other ladies said no. And then Gillyweed, who like, yeah, still back in the early days wearing suspenders, gets on there and is barraged with questions about how do we approach these issues. Ugh, that's what sucks.
Oh, I totally, gosh, I'm so glad you said that, because I think that's something that nobody ever realizes is, like, people will come up to you either as, like, they want to do an interview with you, and it's like, they'll be like, "Oh no, I'm gonna want to interview you about this tournament," and then you start talking, and inevitably one of the questions is like, "How do we get more women into esports?" It's like, my friend, this is not a 5 second soundbite answer, and even if it was, like, there's huge panels of people who like get asked this at conferences and they can't really figure it out. Like, how am I gonna have that answer? Or it'll be like the fan who means well, but is like, we need more women. Like, I'm so glad that you're up there. And I'm just like, you don't know like how to even respond, You're just like, okay, thanks, but like I'm still like I'm working away. Like, what about my work ethic? What about that time that I like called that draft pick that like 3 picks early? Like, is that also good? Is that just because
Yeah.
I'm a woman? Like, it's so hard to understand what is said to you just straight because you're a commentator and what is because you're a woman. And I don't think people ever realize that that is the hardest part. It's not the overt sexism. That's really easy to write off. It's like the weirdness that you don't
Right.
understand.
Exactly, exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to say. Like the overt sexism, it's like what yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's everything else, and those types of people who do that, whether they're, well meaning or not, they are I think they're unintentionally saying for a woman at the
Ugh.
end of those sentences,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm so glad you're the only woman in StarCraft and you're pretty good. And it's like asterisks as a woman. I'm just like, oh, to say I'm a good commentator, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that can be frustrating. But so anyways, you really make yourself, not just, of course you're getting this pressure because you're a woman and it's awesome to see you in one of what was a very high profile esport, and then Blizzard abandoned all of us for Overwatch. But that was awesome, and you didn't just do it, as a woman, but you became one of the most respected commentators in Heroes of the Storm. I like to keep my fingers in all the pies here, so I'm reading a bunch of Reddits, and I remember just every time that I would be going through the Heroes one, I mean, there was nothing but respect for you for the most part. So, I mean, how did you get to that point? What made you strive to be the best commentator, and how did you approach being the best commentator that you could?
I think my biggest approach was definitely knowledge of the game. We talked a bit about talents, and I think it was really important to know talents, not just, you could hover over a talent in the in-game observer and see what it does, but it's another thing entirely to know how that fits within builds, just like, build orders for StarCraft, right? Like, what is this going to lead to? And then beyond that, at the time that we were casting early Heroes days, you didn't always have an in-game observer at the casting desk, so sometimes you needed to be able to identify talents by sight. Taking that to the next level, I really started deep diving study of the teams that were at events. Hero pools was a huge thing that became less of a huge thing, but I feel like people didn't really pay attention to like which heroes was this team's support super favoring, and like how does that come into conflict with this other team who favor those particular heroes. And um like once we could get stats, like knowing and spending time looking up the important statistics, just a lot of like VOD review. I would spend like, prior to a tournament, 8 hours a day for like 2 weeks studying just like one team per day, watching a ton of their VODs and like writing down notes so that I could discover trends and know play styles and know how they played certain maps and which maps they favored. Like you said, there's a ton of information in Heroes, and I would say the biggest focus for me was knowledge and understanding. Past that, there were things that I worked on somewhat, but after like working with the Rocket League talent through the job that I had at Psyonix, I wish I would have worked on more, which is things like, like greatly varying your pace, or like your pitch and those kinds of things. Like, I did some work on that, but and I did a lot of like practice casting, but there's a lot more now that I've been able to learn that, like, I think back, I'm like, man, I wish I would have like known these things and thought about these things more and like really worked on them as well.
I think that's something that you learn when you start to dive into a little more play by play.
Hmm.
And did you just assume, or did you really, what made you choose analysis as the part of the combination of casters that you were going to go for? Why didn't you choose play by play?
uh well, it's weird because heroes, you never really could do one or the other, um because fights break out all the time in the moment. So you kind of really have to, I'd say the best commentators, and like I would classify like myself and Dread when we were at the very top, like duo wise is that is you're able to share the play by play back and forth and then have conversation about the analysis in the downtimes. And we did work a little bit on that. I would say that's another thing that I wish that I would have been more trusting in at the time, is like really working on our duo. We did it like the very end, like Gold Club World Championship, like as some of our best duo casting, but just like knowing that that was a thing that you should be doing wasn't really something that I knew or like did. Um so I would say like I kind of just did both, but for me I think one thing that's hard with play by play as a woman, at least with my pitch of voice, is like having a higher pitch voice. I was so limited in like the pitch of where I could go. So so I really had to like work with pacing instead as generating hype, and I think there was just like it was a little bit more limiting for me, so I tended to like analysis more. But when I did play by play and actually could nail something, I was definitely very proud. Like most proud of those moments.
I certainly know there's a lot of clips of you doing play by play, so it's not like you were shunned. But it is one of the easiest things to strike out a woman for, is that she
Mm.
can't do play by play because she doesn't have the same range, or that it's not good to listen to. But I know that that's a change in, which is a good news. Actually, a lot of the up and coming women commentators that I've been keeping an eye on, which sounds weird, but are actually coming up as play by play, which is really awesome.
That is dope.
Uh, yeah, and that I feel like more and more people are recognizing the benefit of both, practicing both and having the ability to do both. But, you say that it's funny. It's nice that I did an interview with an Overwatch caster before this, but Heroes of the Storm, fights can pop out anytime. Definitely. Overwatch, fights can pop out anytime. In fact, when the fuck is there time for analysis? I don't understand that game.
Out
But
of game.
yeah, exactly, out of the game. But they actually are very committed to the idea of a play-by-play and a color commentator.
Hmm.
Very much so. That is, and they do all the pairings. There's a little bit of mixing and matching in their tier 2 system, but basically they are mixing and matching to determine who would be the best duo to bring up. So it's funny you tell me that, though. Like, I mean, do you think that there is a possibility that Heroes of the Storm could have been more strict on either roles? Or do you just think that maybe it's actually not even the best thing to do? I mean, is it really the best thing to have such strict roles when you're in a commentating duo?
I think it's really good for refinement. Like when an esports developing and when you've got a lot of like community casters being elevated, so like start of heroes, right? With the exception of a few people who are coming over from other games, I think it's easier to focus on one particular element or one particular role, and then eventually I think there's benefits to both, and it's purely dependent on the game. So like for instance, Rocket League can run both. There are like set play by play and set color commentators, but because Rocket League is so action based, what ends up happening is you've got like one person talking 70% of the time and then another person 30, and it depends if your casters are okay with that. Or you can run a hybrid style, but then you may have some tricky handoffs, so you really need to have trust between the two people commentating. So I think there is value to I really think there's value to at least understanding how to do each role if you are going to have each role be separated, so that you know when you should be sharing the mic, if nothing else.
Did Heroes kind of force duos? I kind of saw you guys more as StarCraft, where you were mixing and matching.
Obviously, for HGC, we were definitely set with our duo, but we would at events mix and match, which I mean, when you've got like a hybrid style, is really easy to do. And I think it was really nice because I liked to think that I was a very flexible commentator, and I would know like, all right, I really feel like Caldor does this thing particularly well, so I need to adapt my style to like fit this. Or like Trixler does this super well, and I'm gonna come in to like fill this weakness. Or somebody new as well. I tried to be very like cognizant of how do I approach this duo, and sometimes with some people we would talk about it, sometimes we'd just come in and then it would fit. And the cool thing when you have the ability to mix duos like that is you start to develop different like styles. Like Caldor and I felt told stories really well. Whereas me and like when I would cast with Grubby, we would like just freak out over cool talents, like or like same with Tetcher because he really liked talents too, and we'd be like geeking out over a different talent builder, like, ooh, what does that mean and how does this work? So I liked being able to, it was kind of like a puzzle to figure out every time you cast with somebody new.
I think it also gives you this nice, like, you can see what you can improve on and what you can be more likely to kind of take ideas from other people.
Oh yeah.
I feel like some of these other esports, one of the things that's missing is that they don't, if they're not casting it, they're oftentimes not watching it. And right now, there's of
Really?
course the issue of like time zones. Oh, they'll keep up to date with it. I don't want to say that they're like totally lazy. Like that's not my point. But
Oh.
they aren't at an event, right, all together doing
Oh
the same
yeah.
event. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Uh, that's more what I meant. And that can happen with other esports as well. But they're the duo that comes in and then they leave, and the next duo comes in and then they leave, right?
Mhm.
Whereas for StarCraft, it's very much like everyone goes in, everyone has drinks together, everyone comes back. Like so, I always found that like I liked that I could be so personal with people, and I would learn different traits of their commentating style that I could bring in that I feel like doesn't really happen when you just watch someone. Although, of course, watching someone you like and trying to learn from them is also a good thing. So, when you were really trying to improve your craft, you said you hired a coach, which is
Mhm.
awesome, to teach you about Heroes of the Storm. Did you ever look into coaching for the more technical side of things, like using your voice and being on camera?
What do you mean? Like coaching casting?
There are, for instance, I actually went and found a voice coach a couple years
Mm.
ago. So they mostly do, of course, like voice acting or a singing coach or something like that. But there are definitely they are also like will help you improve your public speaking, and that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
just general voice coach.
Yeah. So I didn't take any formal voice coaching classes, but I looked up a ton of vocal exercises to do, which actually had the net benefit of like lowering my voice somewhat, which increased my range and helped me speak just like sound more confident, even though there was no change. But people were like, "Oh man, you're sounding so much more confident," and I'm like, "Cool, man. It's just I'm like training my voice more." So I did that. I think the biggest thing though is I took improv classes. Improv classes are so good for a commentator if you can afford them. They are really helpful.
So I've heard. I think that it is, but I'm curious as to hear why you thought it helped you so much.
Yeah, they just they help you to be able to like on the fly respond to things. That was one thing that I was just like so nervous all the time on broadcast that it was really hard for me to um, be okay in the moment of like, oh, someone's throwing this joke at me because the classes themselves teach you how to quick-wittedly respond to things. So like a good example is thinking in categories. So one all improv is games, right? So one game is like they um the teacher gives you name 8 movies that are include a person's name in them, right? And then you're like sitting there and the people around you are like passing a ball around and you're like freaking out. You're like, I can't think of anything, I can't think of anything. And then when you get done, he'll have people name stuff and you realize that literally all you have to do is name Disney movies, Mulan, Cinderella, Aladdin, and then you're like, "Oh yeah." So you basically go through categories of like, "All right, how do I respond to this? Is it a TV show reference? What show? Do I respond with something else? Like do I do this? What movies do I have, right? Like in my repository?" And it just helps you work out of like being so scared to respond to something because you don't say it perfectly that you end up not saying anything at all.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, you learn to be imperfect, and it's basically it's practicing. It is, and you do all the imperfect stuff in practice, and then hopefully it all shines perfect on the broadcast. But it is practicing, and it
Yeah.
is flexing that muscle, that originality muscle, that quick wittiness response. Like it's just, I definitely agree that it's good. It's something that also voice actors take pretty seriously. It's just pretty much my journey started with voice lessons just for casting, but I ended up taking voice acting lessons. But they also like heavily suggest it, and I went to a improv seminar at TwitchCon last year,
Oh
and
yeah?
those guys are, yeah, the ones leading are actually quite amazing. They're very, very good at their jobs, and I followed them on Twitch, and it really does. I mean, there is always sometimes a bit of that, just like people who are good at it are going to be in it, you know? It's not necessarily someone started off super shy and then got good, but that also happens a decent amount as well. Um, and I think that is a lot of anything is practicing and letting yourself be imperfect to get better. But for instance, right now, I recently did a hosting job more than commentating. So I come in as a community commentator that is mostly known for analysis. I also shied away from play by play just because I thought, like, naturally I wouldn't do a very good job at it. And then started to kind of mix and match. And now I am totally comfortable with being the play by play lead on a casting duo. And then recently, I was able to actually host for the internet portion of things, anyways. So, but yeah, same job. Like, you come in, you introduce, you ask the questions, you exit, and then you do nothing for an hour.
It's so great though, isn't it? Like to do something completely outside of your comfort zone. So for example, I've always like when it comes to hosting looked up to Anna. She is just like so composed and like amazing, you know. She just carries this presence and um I've like I got like one stage hosting gig and I got up there and I was like, but what do I do with my body? Because I've always been at a desk, like standing or sitting. I've got something here to like stand, like hold my hands on, and then like no one ever sees my legs. And suddenly my whole body was exposed, and I was like, what? I don't how do this. And I was just like, how does Anna do this every time? I don't. It's so good for you to go outside your comfort zone because you'll always learn things. You'll learn something from it. You'll have some sort of takeaway that will help, even if you go back to like this specific role, you know? But at the same time, it's like terrifying, you know? I don't, what do I do with this body?
Yeah, the first time I did it, I did something I like over prepared. And I quickly learned that I am not a preparer when it comes to desk hosting. It is very much about improv. So I
Yeah.
kind of ditched that pretty quickly. And but yeah, the improv, like that helped me. That is what I'm trying to learn right now, basically. As the host, you're
Hmm.
supposed to make everything feel really good, basically. I think that's kind of
Yeah.
your
There's
job.
everything is as planned always.
Yeah, right. Yeah, of course. But yeah, but also just like when you're your desk hosts, sorry, your guests are just doing something weird. Like you don't want to be the guy that's like, so anyways, on to the next
Yeah.
thing. Like yeah, that's not really a good desk.
Yeah.
Uh, so learning to be like that, that's actually what I was mostly focused on.
Hmm.
When I was talking with people on how to improve. And then you're right, like it helps you with so many other things. I feel like yes, it helped with my commentary, but funnily enough, I did an entire hosting day, like 8 hours of hosting, and then I did a D&D session where I'm the DM,
Oh, yeah?
and I just felt like so much more energized and like imaginative, like I guess. So
Yeah.
I think I gave people the wrong impression of what I usually am like DMing that day, but it did help. It helped a lot. So I think it's important to always change things up. And for most people, that means probably between play by play and cast and analyzing,
Hmm.
since not many actually do go out or get the opportunities to go outside their comfort zone. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is definitely helpful. So when you were hanging out in the Heroes crew, was it a lot of like hanging out after hours and in the bars and building camaraderie, or was it a little more technical, a little more stale?
Hmm. I would say for the most part, it was pretty clicky. Um, I think that's actually one of the things that I struggled with the most. I feel like there was even an event where I came and just hung out with you guys.
Yeah, that's right.
I was like, I don't know where
Right.
any heroes people are. I'm just gonna hang out with you guys. I it's it. There was like a lot of people. We're all introverts, right? Like there were definitely some people who were just like, all right, we're done. I'm going to my room and I'm just gonna like work on notes and chill and like unwind and go to bed. And then there were some people who like really hung out with like players who would be there. And then it it kind of depended. So like for dorm, we would have a tendency to hang out a bit more than I would say like professional stuff. But a lot of times we had such long days anyway that a lot of it was like, all right, I got to go back. I would take down all of the drafts that I had written and then all of the notes that I written and kind of like form the basis for like, all right, how am I feeling for the next day for these teams? What matches do I have? Look at the talent rotation and figure that stuff out. So I would say no. I was really looked up to you guys when I would see you and you're all like done with the show, you're chilling, you're like at that Burbank Marriott life, like in the bar, just like hanging out outside, getting some cheese plates. I shit you not, that actually happened, I swear. I definitely was like a little envious of you guys in the squad.
Yeah, I remember I thought I was fortunate enough to find my busy friend having an off night where I could actually hang out with you. And then by the end of it, you were like, I'm so glad I actually found you guys. Like, I wasn't going to do anything else. So I was like,
Mm,
oh.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember we finished a bottle of whiskey. Me and Maynard, that is, you didn't drink it.
Yeah, no, not definitely not if I had a show the next day, but good job.
Yeah. Well, I think because it was weird. That was actually like that day that we were like supposed to transport over to the studio elsewhere. But anyways, not that we don't drink. I'm not trying to like cover me. Like we definitely drink
Oh
before a
yeah.
show. It happens. But
Yeah.
anyways, I mean, do you think that? I mean, it's not really a problem being, going home and going to your room and doing the studying. I mean, did you ever, it's you kind of are envious of us hanging out afterwards because friends are cool. But were you ever envious of, I guess, the type of show that StarCraft seems to put on kind of uniquely? We're very casual, we're very friendly. It's just you kind of almost get a little bit made fun of for being a dork if you bring in notes. It's a lot more about the show and the feeling that you give the people. So, did you ever think at one point like, man, I think we need to loosen up here. I think we need to just focus on some different things besides the technical aspect?
uh yes and no. I feel like the like normal undercurrent of heroes once we were in HGC mode was very like, I don't know how this is doing. They're spending a lot of money on this. Like we have to make sure that we're like putting on the very best show. Down to like, we wore pretty formal wardrobe and um we I think myself personally, I always just need notes like that. So that style like just suits me better. I feel most confident when I know I've like over prepared. So yes and no. Like we would start to like loosen up. I think once we in our duos like started like developing good relationships. Like there are moments when Dread and I would like dance on desk, especially in draft music, and like we definitely goofed around more and made jokes and stuff. But I just don't know if myself personally like would be totally great in like a we're just gonna come in and like wing it and see what happens, maybe if I really really felt comfortable in like my knowledge of the game, maybe then.
Interesting. I do think that it's just different in some esports and
Yeah.
what the fans are also going to perceive. I mean, I think obviously your feelings are what's most important because confidence on the desk is pretty much most important. But if you did take a day off and just, went so super casual, I mean, it might be less about what you were bringing and more about what the fans are expecting, which I know can be a tough one. Plus all the producers, right? It seems like Blizzard definitely went the direction of super professional and super, traditional sporty and whatnot. And yeah, it seems to be the way they've gone with Overwatch anyways. They don't wear tuxes. They don't wear like suits and tuxes, so that doesn't happen. But it's
Yeah,
still very.
their wardrobe got like changed from HGC, but a lot of times, we like look at some of the stuff that happened with HGC as like a precursor to Overwatch for sure.
I mean, I feel like that's a fact.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Blizzard has never gone out and said that it was the case, but I feel like enough people have given enough stories to say that Heroes of the Storm was kind of a testing ground
Mhm.
for what they're going to do with Overwatch. And that sucks, I mean, it was so weird being this game that literally from 2012, 2013, people were saying a dead game to watching Heroes of the Storm explode and kind of, we're a little bit jealous, we made fun of you guys occasionally, but watching you guys within 2 years suddenly go, yeah, we don't know where we're at right now.
Yeah.
That was very odd. And it sounds like that actually did affect your decisions for your job. I mean, was
Yeah.
the stress of not having a job and being pushed out, was that just, I mean, did it eventually force you to push out? I know you were kind of leaving slightly before Here's the Storm actually got canceled. So
Yeah. So I mean, one thing to consider is the workload for the first year of HGC was fucking insane. Like, it was a lot. They were patching the game every 5 weeks, maybe even, like, faster, and every patch had stats changes, talent changes for heroes, maybe a new map, maybe a new hero, and it was exhausting to try to keep up with it, knowing that you casted 3 3 days a week, you had 8 teams within your region, but then every so many weeks you had to catch up with other regions too. And if you were doing your due diligence and actually studying those regions, really the best thing that to do would be try to watch all of those at the same time. It was exhausting. And I think there were some like, you know, at least like we need to see what else like we could be doing. So like that was something that both Dread and I had like felt, and um both had kind of come to the decision to like take a step back, and thankfully at least like Blizzard was able to work in where we each of us would like take turns on a season, and then they brought Jay How in. What sucked is that we didn't get to cast together anymore, and we were kind of like we were one of the favorite duos, and we really liked casting together, but what it did do was enable me to start hosting, desk hosting, which for Rocket League, and that's kind of my favorite role now. Like if like being on an esports broadcast, I love desk hosting, and yeah, it's just something about it. It's like kind of like that improv thing, and like being able to like kind of like help people talk about the things that they find passionate about, and like kind of building narratives too has just always been something that I loved doing anyway, and like it just feels really good as a desk host. um but yeah, it like helped me get into Rocket League, which then like Heroes is another like very passionate amazing community that I fell in love with, and then like eventually got my job with Psyonix, which I will be eternally grateful for. So it helped me so that when the HGC crash happened, really I had already kind of found another avenue, but it did not lessen the hurt at all for my very dear friends and like all of the players.
Yeah, that was, I mean, that was just a really insane, it was a bleak moment for all of esports, really. It was the worst for you guys for obvious reasons. It felt really bad for Blizzard Sports,
Hmm.
StarCraft. And then I think in general, the esports community kind of was like, well, no one's ever just dropped us, because esports was also and still is growing and getting metas of esports. Where it was very much community grown. It was very much tournament organizers were organizing tournaments, and
Hmm.
it was very obvious when the tournament organizers were getting disinterested, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas when the publishers came in and are suddenly taking control of their esports, it was so much more of a question, and so many other things that can happen with it. But it was, yeah, it was just so much more in question. So for them to just be like, actually, we aren't doing this, and in a very brutal fashion. I mean, we don't have to rehash it, but it was shocking and kind of appalling. And I'm glad that it sounds like a lot of people have found their way out.
Yeah.
But God, I think that's something that we were, as I said, StarCraft was also in, like, we're always, it seems like, in a similar boat. We're like, well, I don't know what we're gonna do,
I know.
and
I worried about you
okay.
guys too. Like, how are you feeling, and are you guys gonna be okay? Like, oh yeah, it was definitely a shock.
But now everything's okay, and things seem to have worked out. But anywho, shoot, I had a question in mind, and then I thought about just the sadness that has
Sorry.
become Blizzard.
No.
Uh, hosting, yeah. So, funnily enough, I was talking to Claris for the previous episode just a couple of days ago,
Oh yeah.
and when I said that I started to enjoy hosting, he was like, "Oh, really? What'd you enjoy?" And I was like, well, oh God, because I feel like no one's really truly asked me that type of question before. Like, well, why do you like it, casting? Because I'd be like, well, I this thing and this thing, and I would have to think about it. And you gave a much better answer as to why you like hosting. Where it feels like you're in control. It feels like you can kind of make everyone feel like a little bit better as well. You can give them these opportunities to really shine,
Yes.
and thus shine yourself.
Mhm.
So it feels like, I don't know, it's very cliche, but it kind of feels like a loving role.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
It's like it's super supportive. you know that like overall people are gonna love the show if people are like connecting and enjoying things together, right? Like sharing their passions together. So, and you're kind of the facilitator and the smoother out of those connections and processes. And it's really fun.
When you first did hosting, I mean, what were some of the things that you tried to focus in on? Did you study anyone or have a general idea as to what you're going to do?
Well, I think I was lucky in that I started with hosting heroes. Events here and there were like they'd be like, we're not going to bring in an outside host, so we're going to have you guys you few people rotate through the host role. And ultimately that last BlizzCon, actually they did the same thing, and at that point I was like, you can't not have a dedicated desk host for BlizzCon. So I actually stepped down from casting, which sucked, but I wanted to make sure there was a dedicated desk host for that event. But because I was desk hosting with people that I knew, I could be like, all right, this person lights up when they talk about these things or like these teams or these people, and being able to like weave those things together and then like start to figure out, all right, what are the big points that we want to hit, and then what are the big points you want to hit, and starting to talk to people, which really helped in Rocket League because I came in and didn't know like only basically what I could study off of like a few VODs and Wikipedia. So I'd be like, Crowley, what do you want to talk about for this segment? He'd be like, oh, I really like this player or like this team or blah, blah, blah. And then I'd like work it in. And then it's like, you basically have point A, point B, point C, and then D is the game. And so you're like, how do I get from here? How do I segue from that thing to this thing and then like move around to this thing? It's really fun. I love it. I don't know. It's just like putting a puzzle together, you know?
You huh. I don't share the same puzzle making feeling about hosting, but you're not wrong. It's just I've never thought about it in that way. But yeah, you're right. It's really nice to be able to work with people that you know, obviously, and actually able to
Yeah.
talk to them. But does that change the way that you study for versus a commentator versus a host? Do you think that one job is more difficult than the other?
Uh, I think I think hosting is more difficult than people give it credit for. I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, you can just like host this game without even like studying it or doing anything like that." And I think there are maybe people who do that, which is why it gives it a bad rep. But I think truly good hosts are studying a bit differently, but I kid you not, I took more notes about actual games when I hosted than when I was casting, because casting you kind of inherently remember the games you cast, whereas hosting I was like jotting down, looking for trends and patterns that then I could be like, it seemed then you're asking questions that you already know the answers to, but like it's not your job to answer them. So, but you want to make sure that they're answerable questions in the first place so that you don't make somebody look bad. So you're like, it seems like this team was struggling here. Why do you think that was? And in your head you're like, because like XYZ, right? But that's not your job. Your job is to like get them to be able to get to that point. So yeah, it's definitely a different prep for sure, making sure that you know players and stories and histories and all of that, but it's not any less, that's for sure.
I I was also kind of doing like the jotting down notes thing, and then I kind of gave that up, to be honest. But it's I would just remember them for the most part. But
Yeah.
like, do you? I mean, it also depends on what type of host I suppose it is, like what type of desk it is. Sorry, what type of desk it is, because I
Yeah.
think that is something I'm not really communicating. Is that so many different host roles and there's so many different types of desks. There's
Oh
actually,
yeah.
esports that want to do really deep dive analysis, two people talking, third and fourth people ready to analyze both teams, the works.
Mhm.
And there's like, you are literally filling time because we cannot run 10 minutes of ads. So you will
Yeah.
fill 5 minutes and do what you can, which is kind of more so what StarCraft does. So,
Yeah.
but it does require a lot more work than people realize. And I think there's also just like, you got to realize that there's just something about being on camera and talking for a living that some people do well in one regard and not in another, or not
Mm.
well at all, of course. But yeah, I've seen people who are pretty good commentators and then they get a desk host job and it is like something click, like something changes in their mind, and they just like go from like being this like natural, okay to talk, funny person to being like, so anyways,
I
what's
think
up
it's like
next?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like the I think it's filling for sure. Like the second that fill becomes your responsibility, because when you're an analyst, like a desk analyst, you're just answering questions and you're making sure to answer them in a long fashion to help buy time, but like it's not your job to go like topic to topic to topic. Really, it's the host. Meanwhile, the host is like, all right, I know I'm gonna have to fill for 13 minutes, so I've just got to start jotting down like what are these random things, like what heroes do you want to see in the Nexus, right? Like really go broad strokes. And every time you see a host do that, where they just like broaden out their questions, you're like, oh shit, they're running out of time. We got to do something. Hurry.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like that always like is the eye opener for people who go from another role into hosting.
It's this weirdly like easy and yet very oddly stressful and challenging job
Mhm.
that I think you really just have to try yourself before you can really determine if you're gonna like it or be good at it. So,
Totally agree.
which doesn't really happen too often though. I mean, one of the weird things is that not many people want to be a host for different reasons, but then there is only one host job for like the event, right? We
Mhm.
have not gotten to a point where we transfer over hosts, which I know some people are trying to make different, but yeah, for 8 hours the same host, 4 days out of the week, and I was going somewhere with that, but the that is the difficulty of getting that job, right? Like
Mhm.
how did you maneuver yourself into actually, well, I mean, you kind of accepted actually, but how would you think other people could maneuver their way? I mean, when you were given this opportunity to do a host job and then you said, okay, I'm going to be the host, like I'm just gonna take responsibility here. Did that help you at all, like pitch yourself to other organizations? When you were looking for outside here's the storm stuff, did becoming a host actually give you more, I guess, resume building? Did it help
Yes.
you move over?
Yeah, I think it's a little known secret to people who are like coming up through community to cast a game. Which feels like it's less and less with big games, but when you're grassroots coming up to cast and you kind of get those casting roles and you start to look at like what am I really aiming to do past this game, like maybe you're in a game that is going to survive for all time, but really like few esports do. And I feel like it's harder to transition to another game as a caster, as an analyst. And that's not that you can't do it, it's totally a dev perception thing, because I think devs are always really scared to like bring in an outside person who may not know the game, because they're going to get hard flamed when there's like XYZ person who has zero commentary experience maybe, but like other than just like doing the grind in community tournaments, and it's like that person deserves to be there. Why are you bringing in this person? And when for some like reason it's more okay to like the perception of a community to have a host from a different game than it is for a commentator. That happened to me with Rocket League. Like they had Axel Toss and they had me as well, and I helped bring in like F dot, and that it's just there's something about it being more okay when you're a host, because you're kind of playing that like what is it about this anyway, like that role where you don't have to know every single thing or you're gonna get like ostracized for it.
Right. I mean, it's kind of the nature of the host role, as you were saying. Like
Hmm.
you preferably have a host who knows the answer to a lot of their questions, but their job is to ask those questions.
Yes.
So they might be able to ask more pointed questions than somebody doesn't know. But the point is, even the newbies will be asking questions, and that's kind of their job.
Yes.
So that makes a lot of sense. I think there is kind of that like order of things as to how difficult it is to transfer over. Obviously, pure analysis is going to be difficult to transfer over, and then
Oh yeah.
play by play can get maybe a little bit of a crossover, and then host, and then I mean stage host, right? But it isn't, it is worth noting that it's not always easy. I mean, Anna actually got into not into trouble. She was part of some of this drama that we're talking about, where Rainbow Six had that guy who was doing some of their stuff,
Oh yeah.
and she got brought in, and it was crazy. I mean, luckily the Rainbow Six commentators were very quick to jump to their defense, and point out the qualifications and whatnot. But it was weird, and just in general, the weirdness that can come from being a certain position in esports and then just jumping in to another esport is very, very weird. I mean, did you ever feel like you were indebted to Rocket League because they let you try this out, because they let you in? I mean, do you think that there should be more crossover, or or like should people just let their community grow naturally? I mean, how does the future of esports look in that fashion?
Um, I do believe there's more merit to the experience one learns in the technicalities of casting that a lot of devs when picking talent don't recognize as true like experience and time put in, even if it's another game. I think you can do your due diligence by recognizing if it's a talent who has a really good work ethic and is going to put the work in to learn the game, and that you have to be willing to put some time into helping them improve and see what feedback is beneficial to improving. So I definitely think that's the case. At the same time, I think just in general, devs when they're running their esports can do a better job of providing feedback both to people who are growing through the community and people who are making that transition, because I think just in general a lot of them don't provide feedback to where basically the only place that you can go for feedback is the public, and as we all know that's generally not the best place to try to figure out where what you need to actually improve on.
Right? Yeah. I mean, not
Yes.
only is it terrible and there's going to be hateful comments, but also people just don't know what they're talking about, both in the sense of like they're not taking into account, what is good and what is opinion, as well as just like they don't know what the producers would want. They don't know what the show would want. So there's a lot of reasons not to go to the public, for sure.
Yes.
That's a very good point. That's a very good topic to bring up, is that it does. I am learning through this podcast about the other esports and how they do things, because my perception is all about StarCraft, but
Mm,
there seems to be very little feedback as far as that goes.
yeah.
I've heard different things about like League, maybe has a lot of like review and like discussions about their show, but it
Hmm.
sounds like a lot of other esports. Truly, if you get hired for a job for one of these esports, you can even email the people, all right, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I'll give you feedback," and then they won't, or they just won't respond. And I don't want to paint them as bad guys because of it, but it is a lot of esports are not well-oiled machines that are run purely for tournaments.
Yeah.
There is not one guy whose job is to give you feedback. So,
No.
yeah, expecting someone to, do another job on top of that is really difficult to do. I mean, do you think that as we get more tournaments and go more towards, I guess, like the structure here, like do you think that there should be part of their job should be making sure to give feedback to these casters, or do you think that's only something that really needs to be done when something is terribly wrong?
No, I absolutely think there should be a person in place, and that was my job when I worked at Psyonix. And I always applaud Psyonix for wanting to like take a chance on bringing on like a commentator host, like a talent to like move into that role, because I think you and I can agree there's not a ton of where do I go after casting. um do I switch into another game? We've talked about how hard that is. What can I use this experience for? And like I it's hard. Like you can say like maybe community, like a community management or something like that, but even that there are places that'll say like, "Oh, that's not really the right like fit experience wise." So I truly believe what happens with devs, and this happened with Blizzard, but I don't fault anybody for it, is you're looking at the dev for feedback. They're like, we've got a show running. Like that's I'm just happy we've got a show running. No one's like extra mad about anything. Like things are just like working. It's okay. But then you're seeing all this public stuff of like, oh, I hate this caster. She talks too fast. Her voice is too high. All of these things that you're like, well, they're saying these things. Like, what do you? What do I listen to? And for me, what really helped is my best friend, his name is Adam. He watched literally everything I casted. And then we would set goals. He would be like, hey, I hear this crutch word popping up. Here's some synonyms. Like, or like write some synonyms down. Like he was so beneficial at being able to like parse through Reddit posts, but not everyone has an Adam. I know how fortunate I was to have him, or am to have him as a friend. And um I think it's so important, because when commentary as a job is so uh volatile, if you don't have someone who's helping you with the public feedback, and that includes like from higher ups to know that you're okay, you basically feel like every event could be your last. And it is fucking terrifying. And it is like one thing that contributed to me being like, I need to make a change, because it is so stressful. Um, but like a lot of times the people who are your bosses, they have never been esports talent, so they're like generally like, maybe you could like sound more positive about this thing. But then you're like, when did I like? Can you give me a specific example? And they're like, no, I can't. Okay, bye. Sorry. Like like they're focused on other things. So I do think that it's going to be having core talent managers. And from what I've heard, like from you with Riot too, they do have things like this. They help to get coaching and stuff. Um, and like having someone to help even train with VOD review. That's like one thing that I really tried to help with the talent that I worked with. Just at least helping give people the tools to know, like, okay, what do I actually want to work on? What's actually valid feedback and what's not.
Do you consider yourself a good person for feedback? Do you like not get angry at feedback or critiques or whatever?
Um, I think it depends. It's I don't like getting feedback. Like I'm between games. Here's the things that help, and here's the things that are like, it's basically like small things. So if I'm between games, I'm on a commercial break and I see like, hey, you've said the word indeed 20 times. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna fix that and not say indeed. But if it's like hey, you are I don't even know, like your play by play pacing could be like elevated by doing X, Y, and Z. That's a thing I'd rather have at the end of the day. So then I can like go through the paces of like, how am I gonna implement this? What do I need to do? Instead of like potentially trying to work on something that's gonna mess me up more. But otherwise, yeah. And the more often I get feedback, the more I really like it and crave it. And I think that's a lot of people is like, you get into your head like, well, no one's saying anything, so I guess I'm good. And then when someone says you're not, you're like, oh no, I must be terrible. Whereas if you get like regimented weekly feedback, you get into the place where you're just like, all right, give me the next thing. I'm ready to keep working.
Right. And if it was set up on a weekly basis, it also is probably coming from someone who is doing it correctly, right? So
I
kind of
mean,
keeping the feelings out of it and
yeah.
being more on the it's not a you problem, it's an us problem. Let's tackle it together.
Yeah, and I think like that's one thing that I always really tried with the talent that I worked with, like for Rocket League, is I always really tried to like let them know like there's some mechanic stuff that is definitely fact, but then a lot of this is just like going to be my perception, and I understand that you might be trying to work actively for a different reason that I'm not getting there. So like I'm open to you telling me like, I don't like this, and let's have a conversation about like, is this a thing you agree with and want to work on? If so, I can help you figure out how to do that. Cuz I think that whole opinion versus fact thing is something that a lot of people don't think about. Is what I like in a commentator doesn't mean that they're a good commentator. It's just what I prefer.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of weird to parse through feedback. We've kind of we've witnessed, me and my friends in StarCraft, we've witnessed these like ways of way the community can react. And it's the oddest thing, I could do a cast with someone that I think that person actually was really off in a pretty bad way.
Mhm.
And I go and there's nothing said. Absolutely nothing.
Mhm.
Sometimes because they've built a very good brand,
Yeah.
they're being given the benefit of the doubt, which is fair. Or in some cases, people just really don't notice. And I'm like,
Mhm.
how did you not notice?
I know.
And
Yeah.
then other ways you think you kicked ass, or you were listening to someone trying to take yourself out of it. Like you're listening to someone, you're like, wow, that was really good commentary. You go to the forums and they're like, didn't like how hype he got. And you're like, Okay, all right, I guess. It can be very odd, you know. We've also
Mhm.
seen that, like, when we bring people up into our majors, or whatever we want to call them, our premier events, there's almost always an influx of positivity, even if they
Oh, new
aren't.
people are the best. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
so they get this influx of positivity, you know, and I'll like be blunt whether they deserve it or not, right? Like
Yeah.
my point is that they get it, and then eventually people realize, like, oh wait, this thing bothers me, that thing's bother me, and then there's like it's like a peak, and then it goes to a valley, and then it kind of levels out, and then the best possibility for people who have gone through that is to just not be talked about.
Yeah.
That's like the best case scenario, which obviously confuses the devs that you were talking about, right? That the whole
Mhm.
the people who are like, well, that guy I just brought up got a lot of really great feedback, so he's probably better. And it's like, well, that's
Oh.
not exactly it.
Oh, I know. Like in Heroes too, there'd be like, wow, this person's getting like a ton of Reddit love. Like, we got to get them to this event. And it's like, well, like, instead of this person, like, are you sure? Like, this person's been putting in time. Okay, well, like, that's what we're going to do. But that, like, new person love to like straight hate to like then leveling out somewhere is like, I've seen that in I think every esport that I've like watched for casters. It's always just like, new person, yay. Wait, this thing sucks, bandwagon in. Oh gosh, it's crazy.
That's good to know. Not alone. It is so weird though. Like I'm not saying it's necessarily. I would prefer people to be accepting, of course, but it does seem to just very, it really is this yeah, roller coaster that you can follow. But
Mhm.
anyways, like it's very interesting to hear your talk about the Psyonix job. I remember when you got it, and we kind of hung out at Burbank occasionally, and you would talk about it, and I got this vague idea that you were kind of like a talent manager, and I remember asking you once, and you were like, "No, not really." Like you tried to explain it to me. Can you try to explain again what you
Yeah.
did with Rocket League?
Yeah, well, I think too, like early on, because they were awesome and made, this role for me, a lot of it was like figuring it out on the go. But it was esports broadcast specialist, and it kind of like followed two hats. One was helping to manage the talent, and as part of that, we did do one-on-ones and like try to help improve, and I would really try to help when I could community casters as well. And then the other half was sort of like being like the liaison to the production companies that we worked with to like help make sure that things were to the Psyonix standards for Rocket League broadcasts.
That's I guess the you're working with a bunch of different production companies, not just one, not just a DreamHack, or not just MLG or whatever exists nowadays.
Yeah, no, I worked with a few different ones.
Yeah, so you had to keep the brand overall. Well, that's really interesting. So, yeah, those are two hats. But the first hat, the one you mentioned, it feels like it doesn't really exist all that often. I mean, you have talent managers who, I mean, sometimes if I'm being, and not no disrespect to them, but to be honest, it is a bit just like it's being a bit of a mom, like
Mhm.
on a school trip. Like
Yep.
I talked to the talent manager for the players during an event because we have, talent manager. There we go. Talent managers. We're pretty chill. I guess we're like older and more responsible, and none of us are divas, thankfully. And then I hear about the player managers, and then they're like, "Yeah, so I couldn't find this one player, and it turns out that they were passed out in another friend's hotel room, and I couldn't find them." And you're just like,
I would not
"Oh
want to be a
boy."
player manager now.
But yeah, so you hear that, you hear talent managing, and you hear player managing, but it really is more of like a scheduling and making sure people are on time and making sure that they're happy.
Mhm.
Someone who actually goes in and says like, this is how I'm gonna, I mean, it sounds like you were in some ways kind of a coach to be able to give them the direction they needed to do what they would do.
Mhm.
Vaguely describes a coach, right?
Yeah.
I- Is this, have you talked to anyone else in similar positions? Is this something that is popping up in every esport now?
I haven't. I mean, I've heard of people getting talent coaching. I think um a lot of people it's more like the technical aspect of like talent work that they get coaching for. I think the closest thing would be potentially what like Riot does, but I don't have a straight idea of like how they like what resources they have for like the internal talent that they have on staff. Um, Otherwise, not not especially because I do believe that it requires specifically esport talent experience, like you can get talent coaching from an actor and they can help you with, like varying your gestures, working on how you say things, how you make eye contact, how you like your body language on camera, all of those things, but they're not once you get in a game, there's only so much that they can help you with because they're like, I don't even know like what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, so if we had, we hear big profile moves of big profile casters moving on somewhere, and it's sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's a tournament organizer, right? So
Mhm.
Apollo kind of went behind the scenes and came up. Monte Cristo recently is still on camera as far as I see for CS:GO, but he definitely moved also behind the scenes to kind of coordinate tournaments. But yeah, if that had been something that was common to exist, I feel like I would have heard someone else say like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this thing, and I'm gonna be really excited about it."
Yeah.
And yeah, I certainly haven't heard it, which is why I'm so shocked to hear that it exists. But it does seem like it's something that's really necessary. I mean, to have someone to do a specific job is almost always helpful, and that was one of the big problems that was is one of the problems that can happen with working with a publisher like Blizzard
Mhm.
or many others. I don't want to specifically call out Blizzard, but was that it felt like there was 5 people who had 10 hats each.
Yeah.
So you never really, it felt like not just, it wasn't that you were angry, that it was just, it felt like it was out of your control. So you kind of just like, were like, I just, can't blame them, can't do anything about it. And I guess that's that.
Mhm.
Um, and that's really unfortunate. I think it does ultimately hurt the broadcast, and it does push a lot more emphasis on the talent themselves to have a very intrinsic, internal like desire to be better,
Mhm.
which can be difficult to keep as time goes on for multiple reasons. Did you ever find yourself lacking motivation to get better? I mean, you kind of rose through the ranks. I remember one year I was like, "You're gonna get BlizzCon next year, don't worry about it," and you did. So I called it. I nailed
Mm.
that. Once you got BlizzCon, I mean, was there like also this feeling of like, well, what's the next step in this ladder of, I guess, esports corporation?
Sure, like yeah, for a little bit. Not once I did BlizzCon because I was like, I my goal is to commentate an international event, so I wanted to travel internationally. But then, like 3 months later, I got to cast an event in Korea. So I think after that, I was like, now what am I doing? And my goal became like continue doing this as long as I'm happy. And I think I continued to tell myself that. A little bit of it was once I got like the HGC job, it was more, you know, when you start and you get something that you haven't had, like there's this excitement, but it's almost scarier to lose something that you have than to not get something that you really wanted. Like people think people even say that. And um I definitely felt that. There's like all these great community commentators who are putting the work in, and I, on the other hand, was feeling at times like a massive burnout, especially in the first year of HGC. And that could be like very demotivating. I would say it's kind of like ebb and flows. Like you never want to like completely plateau, but you can say like I'm going to put on a good performance and know that I need like a mental health break. I need to take some time for myself. And then I would just kind of like go for a bit. And then I remember at the end of that year, I like completely redid how I approached play by play. And suddenly I just got like really out of nowhere, like, I am so excited to work on this element of my casting. And then that gave me a ton of motivation again to like, first you dip a little bit because like everything suffers when you're really working on something new. And then like you skyrocket in growth again. So absolutely, I would get burnt out. And that HGC schedule, it was a lot. It could definitely burn people out.
Yeah. There's also just this when you're the top commentator of your
Mhm.
scene, whether it's a duo or not, I mean, what is next? It feels, and I know this exists in other professions, of course. It's theoretically you could become a fry cook up to a CEO theoretically, but
Yeah.
at some point you do kind of reach the top, and it feels like with commentating occasionally, depending on the esport, like you eventually hit a ceiling.
Mhm.
And do you think that that is a natural progression then for commentators to move on to other non-commentator gigs, or Is it more about mixing it up, as you said, like trying to work on your play by play, maybe trying a host role or something like that? Like, is it inevitable that on camera talent moves off camera? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, that is a very good question. I would say I believe that it is inevitable that people will move out of talent roles for another role. And I think the only real experience I can go off of for this is my own, and it's you reach a point where you want stability in your life, and maybe some people don't. Like maybe you've got like a setup where you're pretty stable, but the nature of esports is that there's always new games, there's always new exciting things, and if you're not like ready to basically like go back down to potentially like the ground level and work your way up in another game, I think that is sort of the natural progression, like whether you move away from a game or, you know, heaven forbid, like an HGC happens.
Which would be really tough. Let me ask you this: have you ever thought about going back? Have you ever looked back on your casting and hosting career and been like, I mean, you did kind of say it here, but man, I could do so much more. I could be so much better.
Yeah, for sure. Uh I think time wise, I don't know if I would be like I think if I went back for sure, I'd need like a so the time to be able to like devote to the game, but then I think I would be more so interested in like really developing like desk hosting, cuz I feel like I didn't get a ton of time doing that role before I took the Psyonix job where I couldn't take talent roles anymore. So I think I would be more keen to like explore the talent or the desk hosting role if I did jump back in. And I have thought about it, but at the same time, I'm like very invested and like invigorated by my job here. So it hasn't been so much so that I'm like actively like starting to comb through like working a whole bunch of or like playing a whole bunch of like a certain game so that I can try to like put my name at the top of the list for some of those roles.
I kind of like am thinking about. Have you ever watched The Last Dance on Netflix? It's a documentary about Michael Jordan and the Bulls.
Mm-mm.
It's very, very good. I'm not a particular basketball fan, but if you like stories and a lot of esports commentating is stories,
Yeah.
I highly suggest watching it.
Okay.
But anyways, it was kind of one of those things where like, what is it? Like Alexander looked at the world he had conquered and wept because there was no more worlds to conquer, something like that, right?
Yeah.
But it is just like the question of like, well, after winning so much, like, what is that next step? That's kind of a question, I guess, that some people find themselves asking. For StarCraft, it is kind of like our cap is kind of like Tastosis, to be honest. Like, and then they are their own cap, I suppose. So
Yeah.
it is something that you ask, but I feel like the job that you have, um, and the jobs that can grow like it, this kind of like this person you watched out for the talent talks between the talent and producers and all that good stuff would help at least set up the stepping stones to eventually get there. Because I think one thing about esports is that it is very ambiguous. And I said
Mhm.
theoretically you can go from a fry cook to a CEO and however many, manager, executive manager, whatever, whatever. But in esports, it feels very just like on a whim
Mhm.
because of so many reasons. And again, like that just feels like so out of your control that sometimes feels like what ends up spiraling people out of their esport is that they're just like, I don't see that progression.
Yeah.
Did you ever mark your own progression? Did you ever internalize these types of issues and or think up ways of making your own progression system, or was it kind of just natural?
Mm, I I think my situation put me in a position where I always felt like I was running from something. Like when when we found out that they were going to move to like an HGC system and we knew that they were going to like do interviews with potential commentators. It was just like I have to do this or my commentary career's done. And at that point, I didn't really feel like totally established, which was weird since I had just cast the BlizzCon Grand Finals. But I was just like, I don't know, someone else could get this over me. They're pretty good. I think I did start to feel pretty good like, midway through that first year of HGC, but then at the end of that, like toward the end of that year, I was feeling really burnt out and like I'm needing to like see if I can do like another game. So I made that like difficult decision to give up some stability in esports, which is like so dang rare, to try and do more, and then like got the Rocket League gig, which was just like so exciting and like perfectly fit my schedule. And then that year that I was going back and forth between Rocket League and HGC talent work, the start of that, my husband and I separated, and my whole world changed because where I had been like reliant on him for things like benefits, you don't get those as an esports commentator unless you're gonna like pay out of pocket for them. And like, for gigs, you're like hella taxed, right? Like, it's not fun as a contractor to be taxed. Like, it's just like the full time talent jobs are like such a diamond. Like, they're so rare. It's like pretty much riot. So at
Yeah.
that point, like I was like, I know that I have no choice but to end talent work because I am so scared that I will not be able to like sustain myself, especially living in California. So I was looking for other jobs, and like I don't really ever think that my progression from there has always just been like, can I take care of myself in this job in esports, Like that's kind of like always where I've looked since then.
I guess in such unstable professions like esports, it is a lot less about striving towards a goal. Only the most optimistic and um, energetic, I guess, people come in looking towards something, and it feels like very quickly it becomes being chased by something. Actually, it's a race that you're not going towards the finish line. You're just getting as far away from the starting line as possible, which can't it sometimes is very very wearing on the mentality.
Yeah.
Never put it in such words before. I kind of bummed myself out there, but
That was no, but it was like brilliant. It was so true. I think,
yeah,
and that's kind of what contributes to like it's hard. You want as like a commentator to collaborate with the other commentators that you're working with, but unless you have that stability, everyone feels like your opponent. So it's this weird, like, the better you collaborate, the better friendships you have, the better time that you spend outside of, working on the event, but getting cheese plates at the bar. Like, the more time you put into that, the better the show's going to be because you have this camaraderie that like people want to be a part of by watching the show. But because you're fighting those same people for the next gig, if like the stability isn't set up in the first place, like it's so hard to truly build that without that like little bit of like animosity underneath.
especially when it becomes like ultimately the best show is when people are having fun, but it is maybe tempting, or even there are some terrible people in the world that look at it as an opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to stop hanging out and I'm going to study and like purposefully bring up stuff that I know they don't know.
Mhm.
Right? Like, I'm gonna go watch this one vague event that happened at night while they're drinking, and I'm gonna bring that. That can't happen. So it does constantly feel like someone's on your heels,
Mhm.
even in some of the best environments. And you're right, as far as like the coworker versus opponent, vagueness that can happen
Yeah.
is very very odd. So I mean, stability is great for just a whole plethora of reasons. So that's kind of what we I think came down to. But
Yes.
did you ever, I know you streamed a little bit, but did you ever think about doing that as well? Or just, it sounds like there wasn't really time with Heroes.
I did when I could. I never considered it like this is my like job and I'm like equal parts streaming and commentary. Like I think someone like Trixler, he was really good at like devoting all of his extra time past like studying and working on HGC to streaming. And I've always been a person who just needs so much recharge time. Um, but I did do streaming more, I think, as like personal brand, personal community, giving back to the community who supported me during casts. That was a lot more of like how I viewed streaming.
You mentioned that you worked on play by play kind of exclusively after that the changeover, I guess.
Yeah.
What did you do exactly?
Gosh, I don't even know if I can like fully remember exactly, but I basically just like sat down and watched a bunch of like sports play by play and like I think pared down my overall statements to like shorter words so that you could like put spacing between the phrases that you would then shorten to like build intensity. But it required me to stop being as wordy as I was because I was like falling a little bit behind the fights sometimes.
Gotcha. Yeah. Interesting to one of the many things that can make a bit better play-by-play commentator. So that was definitely it's a good one to focus on for sure if you're being too wordy and you're
Yeah.
taking up too much time. Absolutely. I think it's I've tried listening to traditional sportscasters and I've always felt like they are just so different that I've actually struggled to really find a bond or something that I could learn from.
Mhm.
I do think play by play is probably where I could learn the most. There are
Mhm.
some, great calls that people will, your father will remember and he'll be like, I don't watch sports, Dad. I don't know what you're talking about. That I think can, they are very technical. They are very technically correct in
Mhm.
traditional sports. That's for sure. A lot of them, some of them are ex pros. A lot of them went to actually like broadcasting school, like majored in broadcasting,
Yeah.
which so far no one really in esports does. I think we have maybe one or two journalists who became interviews, but not much
Yeah.
else. So, but that's one of the things. Certainly, I found that the better when I actually started thinking about what makes a better play-by-play caster, as I tried to improve my own, I did find that variety was one of the best like tests, I guess, of a commentator. I remember asking my Discord, I was like, "Do you guys think that this is the best or that's the best or whatever?" And or do you think that the word usage is too limited? And they just never thought about it, right? And it just reminded me that so much of commentating is how you make people feel and not what you actually say.
Oh yeah.
But when you do start the deep dive, yeah, keeping succinct sentences and being, having various ways of saying the same thing basically is
Mhm.
they're all very important.
Oh yeah, vocabulary is good for just basically any public speaking job at all. To be able to not use the same crutch words and to be able to notice them in the moment, like being self-aware. I think self-awareness is one of the most important things about commentary, and your ability to like think about how did that work while also still talking or like also still analyzing is pretty hard. But if you're being self-aware, like, that's the third time I've used the word literally, we got to take that one out.
Yep. Uh, it's funny at this point. I feel like while everyone gives analysis a lot of credit, and as they should, good analysts are very, very good, and good analysts use a lot of the same. They work in a lot of the same stuff.
Mhm.
The lengthy, just talk all the time analysts are not very well loved. But anyways, I at this point I feel like I have had so much more respect and I feel like it is kind of more difficult to be a really good play by play commentator. um, even though analysis requires so much more time, I
Mhm.
think, right? And all that research, it's like the actual play by play stuff is so much in the moment,
Yes.
which it can come off as just basically you have it or you don't a lot of the
Mhm.
time. And the truth is, you can definitely study it. You can work on it. One of the things I'm trying to work on right now, I think is very difficult, is humor. Like the the funniest people you will ask them and they won't say they went to fucking clown school. Like they're just funny, right? And it's like this natural thing that we kind of have to work with. Same with like when I watch some of the best commentators of any esport, it feels like they have a larger than life personality,
Yeah.
is what I'll say. And I'll just be like, I don't even know how to start doing that. And then at some point, I recognize that, like, I guess there's a lot of things that lead into that, and that everyone who's gotten to where they have didn't start off that way, or most people who gotten to where they are didn't start that way, I should say. Some people definitely did start off very good, but yeah, you're definitely one of them, Gillyweed. I knew you back when you were just in the suspenders and doing interviews. Back when I thought about going to Korea, that was they first
Oh
interviewed you
my
with me.
gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and then here we are years and years later, and you certainly left a mark on the esports scene. Everyone loves Gillyweed and knows you're a very good commentator for esports, and you put a lot of work in. And I think you've gained that larger than life personality. So it's been awesome talking to you and hearing the way I guess you worked through things. I have one last question from Patreon, and
Yes.
it is: what are the advantages of freelance casting versus working for a publisher versus working for a third party group? So, you know, HGC versus an ESL versus, uh, I guess, whatever freelance would do.
So the question is specifically what's the advantages of like casting for each of those three things, or like working
Yeah.
for each of those three things?
I think he said casting. Yeah, casting. Freelance casting versus well, okay, I guess yeah. I'm gonna have to maybe interpret here. Sorry.
No, it's
What are the
okay.
advantages of freelance casting versus working for a publisher versus working for a third party group?
Okay. So like basically
So,
my transition of jobs has been as such.
yeah,
Um so for casting, anytime you're freelancing, you kind of get to set your own schedule, which is definitely a big benefit. Um you I mean there are very few things quite like being on a desk commentating over a game in a world championship, or like even when you're like as lucky as I have been, like in the grand finals of a world championship, like grand finals of BlizzCon. There is just like there's nothing like it. Like to like know that with the rise of your voice, people are going to cheer. Like it's a fucking cool feeling, guys. It's pretty cool. Like, and I am very thankful that I got to experience that. Um it's really funny. It's fun to like make a Stitches pun at an event and then hear like a crowd chuckle, like it's it is cool to share this thing that you have this passion for. And that other people have a passion for too, and just to be able to like be a part of that and like help tell the stories of the people that you like and you care about. So I think that's obviously a big advantage, to just commentary, being able to commentate in general, and let alone like freelancing. Like I said, dictating your own schedule. Although the downside of that, of course, is like in contracting. You're wondering like what happens if I don't get this next gig, or what happens if they do move a different direction with a talent. Those things can be really crippling and actually can influence um, how you perform. Um, working for a dev, a publisher, the advantage is you you get to know cool stuff that you can't share it, but you get to know cool stuff. Um, you I was lucky too. Like I just think Psyonix is super cool. Like it wasn't just like a dev, but like a really cool, like they made this dope game Rocket League that is like so fun, so unique as an esport. And um I think you do, at least I feel one of the trends might be on an esports team in any dev or publisher, you're wearing a lot of hats. And you do feel like, some of if there's like a production error or something, like you really have to, like, you internalize a lot. There's a lot of like community feedback that you end up as a person internalizing, even if it's like not, if it was not a decision that you made or like you had literally any influence on, but like because the community is so passionate and you want them to be happy, like you can internalize a lot of those things like pretty severely. um I also put in a lot of hours. I just think that was the nature of my job, because I had to be available for talent. And anytime you're like player or talent managing, you're kind of are available at like, like 9 p.m. if someone has an issue. So like
yeah.
yeah, my hours are kind of all over the place. Um, and then working for like a third party, I feel like it's too early for me to really like talk through the advantages here. But I think what you would end up hearing from me like 6 months from now is you get to really make a help make decisions that help like guide, doing things what you feel is the right way. Like for us at Wisdom, it is so important to us that any content we do is, we are actually an active part of the community for the games that we make content for. Like we're trying to like fix the issues and make sure that people are heard, and we're even like trying to bring back some heroes esports in like some capacity. So you I get to be like an influencing voice in making sure that we are doing things the right way. We are like supporting people. We're trying to bring stability to the people that we work with. And those are all things that at the end of the day, I can be like so fucking proud of. And I think that's what you'll end up hearing from me someday.
It is pretty early. How long you been working with
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 wisdom.
your company? Yeah, Wisdom.
Um, I started at the beginning of April, and
Oh
was
wow. Okay.
well, we're still remote, but I was remote out of Arizona and then moved here at the end of May to the Twin Cities.
Right. Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah, it was a great answer.
Thank
I think it
you.
was very poetic. Gorgeous answer for the casting one.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the Patreon support. It's kind of gonna wrap it up here. You can do any shout outs you would like, the content of your company, or if you're still tweeting and whatever, please say so now.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you to you for wanting to have me on. And really, it's just been really nice to get to catch up with you and hang out. Um, for you can follow me. I'm Gillyweed TV. Mainly on Twitter, but you're mainly just gonna see like either photos of my dog or retweets of my company. I work for Wisdom. We are the parent company of brands like Heroes Hearth and Giant Slayer. We make a lot of content for games like TFT and Valorant and Runeterra, as well as Here's the Storm and Warcraft 3. And we are always trying to do more and better stuff, and starting to get more into like some white label work too. So definitely check out. We're very open to feedback and want to know how we can make our content better. So you can always reach out to me or us if you have any ideas. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. I've seen you retweeting some stuff there, and I've
Yeah.
been kind of checking it out and seeing what's up. It's pretty cool.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to check out the Patreon. Thank you so much, Geely, for coming on, and I'll see you guys for the next episode in 2 weeks. Bye.